At the celebration party for my younger brother's college graduation, not only did my parents kick me out of the house, but they also declared they would mortgage the house to fund his startup. Despite the fact that for the past 10 years I had quietly spent over $80,000 to support them financially. But what happened next was truly something no one could have anticipated. I'm Adam Miller, 28 years old, an assembly line worker at an auto factory in the suburbs of Ohio. My life isn't anything to brag about. I work the night shift, 12 hours a day, standing on the production line, hands tightening bolts until they go numb. The smell of machine oil, the clanging of metal, and the bone-chilling cold of the factory in winter have become a part of me. My monthly paycheck after taxes doesn't leave much to spare, but most of that money I send back to my family for utility bills, health insurance, my dad's medication, roof repairs, heating gas. I keep just enough to get by, or more accurately, to survive. I live in a small, rundown apartment that I share with Jake, a co-worker from the factory. The apartment is in an old corner of town with stained walls and windows that creak with every gust of wind. My bed is an old mattress pushed against the wall next to a chipped wooden table. Jake and I split the rent, the electric bill, and sometimes a cheap case of beer for the weekend. My meals are usually instant noodles, sausage sandwiches, or whatever's on sale at the supermarket. Clothes? All secondhand, bought from thrift stores. Once, when the sleeve of my jacket tore, I patched it with duct tape because that month's money had to go to my mom to buy medicine for my dad. Jake looked at me and shook his head. "Why do you live like this, Adam?" I gave a faint smile, not knowing how to answer. My family lives at the end of Maple Street in the suburbs of Ohio, in a 2-story wooden house, its white paint faded, the shingles speckled with moss. My dad, Robert, was an auto mechanic but retired due to chronic back pain. My mom, Susan, used to work part-time as an accountant but now stays home, tending the garden and caring for my dad. Then there's Matthew, my 23-year-old younger brother, about to graduate college with a degree in business. Matthew is my parents' pride and joy, the star of the family. He's quick-witted, charming, and always knows how to make them laugh. And me? I'm Adam, the older brother, the one my parents rely on to keep everything from falling apart. Growing up, our family lived modestly, never with much to spare. The house on Maple Street was all we had. Small, old, but it was home. The wooden floors creaked, the roof leaked, and the water heater was always breaking down. I remember evenings when my mom sat at the kitchen table holding the gas bill, her eyes red. "If we can just get through this winter," she'd say, her voice choked. My dad sat beside her, silent, gripping a cold cup of coffee. Matthew and I were young then, sharing a room with a rickety bunk bed. I liked the bottom bunk because every time Matthew climbed to the top, I'd hear him let out a relieved sigh, like he'd just conquered a mountain. Back then we were close, like two little buddies who knew nothing of the world. But as we grew older, things changed. When I was 18, I earned a partial scholarship to a technical college. It was the first time I saw my parents look at me with pride. "Adam, you're going to make something of yourself," my dad said, clapping me on the shoulder. But then they called me home one snowy evening, the yard blanketed in white. "Adam, the family's struggling," my dad said, his voice low. "Matthew needs to go to a good school, needs opportunities. You're the older brother, you can help, right?" I looked at them, my heart heavy. Matthew was 13 then, just starting high school, and my parents called him their hope. I didn't see any other choice. I dropped out of college, got a job at the auto factory, and began the life of a factory worker. From then on, I became the family's financial backbone, though no one ever said it out loud. Every month, I sent money home for utilities, property taxes, roof maintenance, health insurance, my dad's medication, winter heating gas. I paid for it all, leaving little for myself. Over 10 years, I calculated I sent nearly $80,000. That number represents my sweat, my sleepless nights, the health I've traded away. Because of me, the house on Maple Street became more stable. The roof was replaced, the walls repainted, the water heater stopped breaking down. My dad bought a flat-screen TV, my mom got flower pots to decorate the yard. Matthew was fully supported, college tuition, a nice dorm, designer clothes, parties. My parents stopped frowning when bills arrived. But me? I still lived in a rundown apartment, still wore torn clothes, still ate instant noodles. I'm not jealous of Matthew, honestly, I just wanted my family to be okay. But sometimes I wondered, do they see me? Do they see Adam hunched over in the factory, living in hardship so they could be comfortable? I remember one time when I came home for dinner, Matthew showed off his new sneakers, $200. Nice, right, Adam? He asked, his eyes sparkling. I nodded, giving a faint smile. Those sneakers were worth my entire month's food budget. My mom looked at Matthew, beaming. My boy's so stylish, she said. I sat there, eating cold cuts, thinking about my duct-taped shoes. No one asked if I was okay, if I was tired. I got used to it. But there were moments that stung, like when I was 16 and won second place in a statewide science competition. I brought the trophy home, excited to show my parents. They nodded, said, "Good job, Adam," then turned to ask Matthew about his school play. Matthew had a minor role, nothing big, but that night they threw a party, inviting the neighbors. I stood in the corner holding my trophy, feeling invisible. From childhood, Matthew was the hope, the star. I was the older brother, the one who had to step aside, to sacrifice. My parents aren't cruel, not intentionally, but they have a way of making me feel like I'm just a tool, a money machine. I didn't blame them, not at first. I loved them, I wanted them to be happy. But as time went on, I grew tired. Tired from sleepless nights, tired from the money I earned through sweat, tired from the feeling that no one saw how I was living. I kept working, kept sending money, kept living frugally. I thought as long as my family was okay, I'd be okay. But deep down, a wound was growing, silently, one I didn't even dare face. Then that day came, the day everything inside me broke, the day of Matthew's graduation party. The party took place on a Saturday evening in the backyard of the Maple Street house. Strings of twinkling lights were strung up, the wooden table was covered with a white cloth, and the mouth-watering smell of grilled meat filled the air. Neighbors, Matthew's friends, and a few relatives gathered in full force, laughing and chatting lively. I stood in a corner of the yard holding a cheap can of beer, watching everyone. Matthew, the center of the party, was dressed in a crisp white shirt, his hair neatly styled, telling some story that made his friends burst into laughter. My mom, wearing a new floral dress, bustled back and forth, her smile as bright as if it were her wedding day. My dad, standing by the grill, slapped the shoulders of old friends, his voice hearty. Looking at my family at that moment, anyone would think we were happy. But I felt like an outsider standing beyond the glow of the lights. In the shadows of the very house I'd poured my sweat into keeping afloat. I was wearing an old frayed collared shirt and my duct-taped shoes. I didn't even want to come, but my mom called 3 times saying, "Adam, this is Matthew's big day. You have to be here." I drove from my rundown apartment thinking I'd just sit for a couple of hours, force a few smiles, and leave. But when I stepped into the yard and saw everyone so jubilant, saw Matthew being celebrated, a heavy feeling pressed down on my chest. I tried to swallow it like I had so many times before. The party was in full swing when my dad raised his wine glass, lightly tapping it to get everyone's attention. "Today is a special day," he said, his voice booming, his eyes shining. "My son Matthew has graduated college. He's not just the pride of Susan and me, but the future of the Miller family." The yard erupted in applause. Matthew stood up, bowing in thanks, his smile radiant. I looked at him, thinking of the years he lived lavishly in his dorm, partying while I slaved away in the factory. I tried to smile, but my lips felt stiff. Then my dad continued, and his next words hit me like a knife to the heart. "To celebrate our boy, Susan and I have decided to mortgage this house to help Matthew start a fashion shop. He's got big ideas, and we believe this is an investment in the future." The yard buzzed with excitement, more clapping, a few whistles. Matthew hugged my dad, then my mom, grinning ear to ear. My mom wiped away tears, saying, "We're so proud of you, Matthew." I stood there, the beer can in my hand ice cold as if the blood in my veins had stopped flowing. Mortgage the house? The Maple Street house? The one I'd poured $80,000 of my sweat into over 10 years to keep standing. Utility bills, property taxes, roof repairs, insurance, medication, all of it came from me. And now they were mortgaging it without a single word to me to fund Matthew's fashion shop. I looked at my dad, my mom, Matthew, hoping someone would turn to me, explain, or at least acknowledge what I'd done for this house. But no. They laughed, they hugged, they basked in the glow of the lights and applause. Anger surged inside me like a fire igniting from smoldering ashes. I didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to ruin the party, but I couldn't stand there silently anymore. I stepped forward, my voice trembling but clear. Mortgage the house? Are you serious, without even asking me? The yard fell silent. My dad turned, frowning. Adam, what are you talking about? This is Matthew's party. My mom looked at me, her expression half surprised, half annoyed. Matthew smirked as if I were some clown crashing his stage. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I wasn't invited to speak, was I? But I have to. For 10 years, I dropped out of college, worked night shifts at the factory, sent money home to pay for everything. Utilities, taxes, medication, roof repairs, insurance. $80,000, do you even know that? I live in a rundown apartment, eat instant noodles, wear torn clothes, all to keep this house standing. And now you're mortgaging it for Matthew's shop without a word to me? My dad's face flushed, his eyes blazing. My mom grabbed his arm as if to calm him. Matthew glared at me, muttering something under his breath. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. From the time I was a kid, I stepped aside. Matthew got to go to college, to party, to be called the hope of the family. And me? What am I, a money machine? Have you ever asked if I'm tired, how I'm living? Enough, Adam, my dad roared, his voice like thunder. You're ruining your brother's big day. If you're jealous, just say it. Don't beat around the bush. Jealous? That word felt like a slap in the face. I looked at my dad, the man I once thought was my rock, now standing there calling me jealous. My mom spoke up, her voice icy. Adam, you're the older brother. You should understand. Matthew has potential. He needs this opportunity. You can't be so selfish. I laughed, but it was a bitter, hollow laugh. Selfish? I'm selfish for giving up my dreams, for working myself to exhaustion to support this family? I'm selfish for never asking for anything for myself? I turned to Matthew, who stood there, arms crossed, his expression smug. And you, Matthew, you think you deserve this house? Do you even know who kept it standing? Matthew shrugged, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Adam, don't make a scene. You're a factory worker. What's the big deal? I have ideas, I have vision. You're just jealous because I'm successful, aren't you? His words were like pouring fuel on a fire. I gripped the beer can tightly, wanting to hurl it to the ground, but I held back. I didn't want to become the out-of-control fool in front of everyone. I looked at my parents, waiting for an explanation, an apology, anything, but my dad just pointed toward the gate. If you want to cause trouble, then leave. Don't ruin Matthew's day. My mom nodded, her eyes cold. Adam, you're such a disappointment. I stood there in the middle of the yard, surrounded by the curious stares of neighbors and the whispers of Matthew's friends. I wanted to scream, to tell them about the nights I stayed up with back pain, the meals of nothing but instant noodles, the dreams I'd buried. But I didn't say another word. I turned and walked out of the yard, leaving behind the lights, the laughter, and my family. Inside me, something had just shattered. I drove back to my apartment in the dark, the dim streetlights flickering past the car window. The Maple Street house, the party lights, and the laughter of my parents and Matthew faded into the distance. But their words, selfish, jealous, ruining the big day, echoed in my head, slicing into my heart like a knife. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to hold back tears. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, but because I was afraid that if I did, they'd see me as weak. But that night, I was weak, weaker than ever. My rundown apartment with Jake was the same as always. Stained walls, creaking windows, the faint smell of mildew lingering in the air. Jake was asleep, his snoring echoing from the next room. I sat down on my old mattress, still wearing the frayed collared shirt from the party. I looked around the room, the chipped wooden table, the rusty gas stove, the pile of dirty dishes in the sink. This was the life I'd chosen, or rather the life I'd been forced to choose. 10 years, $80,000, my sweat and health, all to keep the Maple Street house standing. And now, they were mortgaging it, without a word to me, to fund Matthew's fashion shop. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. A fashion shop. Matthew, my little brother, who'd never done a day of hard labor, who'd never known how much a winter gas bill cost, was now called an investment in the future. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay on the mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, and memories flooded back like an old movie I didn't want to watch again. I remembered when I was 15, working part-time at a nearby grocery store, stocking shelves and mopping floors to save up for a bicycle. It was a blue bike with a shiny steel frame displayed in the shop window I passed every day on my way home. I dreamed of riding it through the suburban streets, the wind blowing across my face free. I saved every penny, stashing it in a tin box under my bed. After 6 months, I had enough. I told my mom, my eyes sparkling, "I'm going to buy the bike, Mom." She nodded, smiling kindly, but a few days later, my dad called me into the kitchen. "Adam, Matthew needs a new basketball uniform," he said, his tone firm. "He made the school team. He needs to shine. Can you let me borrow your money? I'll pay you back later." I stood there, my heart constricting. I wanted to say no, to hold on to my dream, but I nodded and handed over the tin box. Matthew's basketball uniform cost twice as much as the bike I'd dreamed of. My dad never paid me back, and my mom only said, "You're the older brother, you have to let your brother have it." I never got that bike. Matthew wore his new uniform, beaming on the court, cheered on by our parents. I stood outside the fence watching him, feeling like a shadow. Then there was the time Matthew showed off his new $200 sneakers while I patched my torn shoes with duct tape. He got to go to college, live lavishly in a dorm, party and buy designer clothes, all with our parents' money, or rather my money. Then he graduated with a business degree, average grades, nothing remarkable. But to our parents, he was the hope, the star. And me? I was the older brother, the one who had to sacrifice. I had to drop out of college despite a partial scholarship because my parents said Matthew needs opportunities. I started working at the auto factory, night shifts, 12 hours, my hands aching from tightening bolts. The smell of machine oil, the clanging of metal, the bone-chilling cold, it all seeped into me. My health deteriorated, my back ached, my eyes grew dark circles. I saved every penny, ate instant noodles, wore old clothes, all to send money home. For utilities, property taxes, insurance, medication, roof repairs. $80,000 over 10 years, and not a single thank you. Not a single time my parents asked how I was living. Those memories, piece by piece, were like small cuts that now merged into one large, bleeding wound. I sat up, turned on the light, and looked in the mirror. My face looked older than my age, with dark circles under my eyes, my hair disheveled. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I'd lived in hardship, scrimping and saving to support my family. I gave up my dreams, my health, my self-respect, only to be called selfish and jealous. That night I realized something. I couldn't keep going like this. I couldn't. The next morning I called the bank to check my account. I'd been sending money home regularly every month like a machine. Utility bills, taxes, insurance, medication, home repairs, all went through my account. I looked at the balance, pitifully small after sending most of my paycheck away. I thought about this rundown apartment, my torn shoes, my instant noodle meals. Then I thought about my parents, about Matthew, about the house they were mortgaging without asking me. A cold shiver ran through me, not anger but clarity. I called the utility company, the gas company, the insurance company. "Cancel the services under Adam Miller's name," I said, my voice calm but firm. I called the pharmacy, canceling my dad's medication orders. I contacted the repairman, telling him not to go to Maple Street anymore. Each phone call was a cut, severing the ties that had bound me for 10 years. I didn't feel relieved, didn't feel happy. I just felt empty, as if I'd lost a part of myself. I sat down and wrote a text to my mom. I'm done sending money. I've done enough. From now on, I'm living for myself. I hit send, then turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear what they had to say, didn't want to hear their blame, apologies, or excuses. I'd heard enough. That night, I lay on my mattress, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't think about bills, medication, or roof repairs. I thought about myself, about Adam, the person who'd forgotten who he was. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't live in hardship for my family anymore. Never again. 2 months after the party, my life began to change, even if just a little. I no longer sent money home, no longer checked utility bills or worried about my dad's medication. For the first time in 10 years, my paycheck was mine. I bought a new pair of shoes, ones that weren't torn or patched with duct tape. I ate a proper meal, steak and mashed potatoes instead of instant noodles. I even started saving a small amount, vaguely thinking about going back to school, though I didn't know where to start. But the biggest change wasn't the money. It was the sense of relief. I no longer carried that invisible burden on my shoulders, no longer felt like my family's money machine. My rundown apartment with Jake was still the same, stained walls, creaking windows, but I started to see it as home, not just a place to crash. Jake noticed the change. "You're smiling more, Adam," he said, taking a sip of beer. I just nodded, not mentioning anything about my family. I didn't want to bring it up, didn't want to remember my mom's cold stare, my dad's shouting, or Matthew's mocking smile. I had cut the ties that bound me to them, and I wanted to believe I'd be okay. But my family didn't let me stay at peace for long. One evening, after coming home exhausted from a night shift, my phone buzzed. It was my mom's number. I stared at the screen, my finger hesitating. For 2 months, they hadn't reached out, not a single text, not a single call. I thought they were angry, or maybe they'd realized I was no longer a tool they could rely on. I took a deep breath and answered. "Adam," my mom's voice came through frail, unlike the sharp tone from the night of the party. "Are you okay?" I didn't answer right away, just mumbled a vague, "Yeah." She was silent for a moment, then continued, her voice choked. "Adam, the family's in a lot of trouble. Can you help?" I gripped the phone tightly, feeling like something was squeezing my heart. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, though I could already guess part of it. My mom sighed and explained that they had loaned Matthew a large sum to start his fashion shop. He said it was a big opportunity, Adam. He promised it would succeed. But Matthew's shop ran into problems before it even opened. Suppliers demanded payment up front. The cost of renting a storefront was astronomical, and Matthew couldn't secure enough capital. My parents had drained their savings, even taken out a bank loan, but it still wasn't enough. Utility bills were piling up. They couldn't afford my dad's medication, and the mortgage payments on the Maple Street house were coming due. "Adam, just this one time," my mom said, her voice trembling. "Help us, help Matthew. You're the older brother, you've always been strong." I listened and wanted to laugh, but my throat tasted bitter. Strong? They called my 10 years of backbreaking work, my life of hardship, strong. They called my sacrifice of dreams and health strong. I stayed silent, letting her continue. "You know we love you, Adam. It's just, Matthew needs this chance. Help him and everything will be okay." I closed my eyes and the image of the Maple Street house flashed in my mind. The roof I paid to repair, the walls I paid to paint, the bills I covered every month. $80,000, 10 years. And they never asked if I was tired, how I was living. Now they were calling, not to apologize, not to understand me, but to ask for money again. I opened my eyes, my voice calm but cold. "Mom, I can't help." "Adam," she nearly shouted, her voice a mix of shock and anger. "What are you saying? You can't abandon your family like this." I heard my dad muttering something in the background, Then my mom continued, her tone urgent. Think it over, Adam. We've done everything for you, raised you, and now you're turning your back on us? I let out a dry laugh, devoid of any joy. Raised me? Mom, I dropped out of college to work, to pay the bills, to support the whole family. I live in a rundown apartment, eat instant noodles, wear torn clothes so you and Matthew could live comfortably. I've done enough. Now I have to live for myself. She went quiet, but I could hear her breathing heavily, as if trying to hold back tears. Adam, you're so selfish, she said, her voice softer now. Who do you think you are to talk like that? Matthew is your brother. He needs you. I shook my head, though she couldn't see. Matthew doesn't need me. He needs money, and I don't have any more to give. I hung up, my hand shaking. The phone buzzed again immediately, but I didn't answer. I turned it off and tossed it onto the table. I sat down on my old mattress, my mind reeling. I wasn't angry at my mom, my dad, or Matthew. I was just tired. Tired of their blame, tired of them never seeing me as a person, only as a source of money. I thought about the years slaving away at the factory, about my torn shoes, about the bicycle I never got. I thought about the night of the party when my dad yelled at me, when my mom called me selfish, when Matthew mocked me as a lowly worker. They would never change. They would never see me. The next day, my dad called. I didn't pick up, but he left a voicemail. Adam, you have to help the family. If you don't, we'll lose everything. Do you want your parents out on the street? I listened to the message, then deleted it. I didn't respond. I couldn't. If I went back, if I sent money, I'd become the Adam of 10 years ago. The Adam who lived in hardship, sacrificed everything only to be taken for granted. I stood up and looked out the window. The suburban Ohio streets were quiet, golden leaves falling gently. I thought about myself, about what I wanted. A technical course, a better apartment, a life free of other people's bills and responsibilities. I didn't know where I was headed, but I knew I wasn't going back. Never again. 6 months after I hung up on my mom, my life began to take on some color. Not the vibrant hues of a movie, but soft shades. Enough to make me feel like I was living, not just surviving. I was still working at the auto factory, but last month the manager called me into his office. Adam, you've been doing great work, he said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. We want you to be the line supervisor. I looked at the paper. A new contract with a 30% raise. I nodded, trying to hide my smile. For the first time in 10 years, I felt my efforts were recognized, not by my family, but by myself. With the new salary, I moved out of the rundown apartment I shared with Jake. I rented a small place in a quieter neighborhood with windows overlooking a park, walls free of stains and no smell of mildew. It was still simple. 1 bedroom, a kitchen corner, a new wooden table, but it was mine. I bought a decent bed that didn't creak and a small TV, a luxury I'd never considered before. Jake came to visit, looked around and whistled. You're moving up, Adam, I laughed, handing him a beer. Moving up? Maybe not, but at least I was living for myself. I enrolled in a night technical course at the local community college. 3 evenings a week after my shift, I sat in a classroom listening to lectures on circuits and mechanical systems. The numbers, diagrams, and assignments were exhausting, but they also made me feel alive. I'd once dreamed of college, of becoming an engineer. Now at 28, I was starting over, slowly but steadily. Every night I sat at my table, opened my books, took notes, and felt like I was building something, not for anyone else, but for myself. I started saving, not much, but enough to think about the future. A small house, a trip somewhere, or just a rainy day fund so I'd never have to live like before. I ate better, no longer relying on instant noodles every day. I bought new clothes, not just clearance items. I even started jogging in the mornings, breathing in the fresh air at the park. My back hurt less, the dark circles under my eyes faded. I looked in the mirror and saw a different Adam. Not the hunched-over factory worker, but a man rediscovering himself. I didn't contact my family. My phone no longer buzzed with calls from my mom or texts from my dad. I didn't know how they were doing, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. I had done more than enough, $80,000, 10 years, and my own self-respect. I didn't resent them, but I chose myself. And for the first time, I felt free. One afternoon, as I returned from class, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and was surprised to see Aunt Ellen, my dad's sister, standing there. She wore a gray sweater, her hair tied back neatly, her kind eyes filled with worry. "Adam, can I come in?" she asked. I nodded, invited her inside, and poured her a glass of water. Aunt Ellen had always been close to me, but we rarely saw each other since she lived in the next city, working as a nurse and busy with her own family. I had a feeling she wasn't here just to visit. She sat down, looking around my small apartment, the window overlooking the park, the new wooden table, no longer the musty smell of my old place. "You're really doing okay," she said, offering a faint smile. But that smile quickly faded. She took a deep breath and began talking about my family, her voice low and somber. Without my money, the Maple Street house crumbled like a sandcastle. My parents had poured all their savings and taken out more bank loans to fund Matthew's fashion shop. But the venture failed spectacularly. Matthew chose the wrong location, didn't know how to manage, and suppliers cut ties when he couldn't pay. The shop shut down after 2 months, leaving behind a mountain of debt. Matthew tried to find a job, but with his average degree and smug attitude, no one hired him. Now he was back home, living off my parents, constantly grumbling and blaming everyone else. My parents, nearing 70, couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments. The bank foreclosed on the Maple Street house, the house I'd poured $80,000 into to keep standing. They moved into a small, rundown rental apartment with peeling walls and dripping pipes. My dad, despite his chronic back pain, took a job as a server at a diner, wiping tables and washing dishes, his steps heavy and labored. My mom started cleaning houses for others, her hands trembling from exhaustion. They ate meager meals and couldn't afford my dad's medication. "They're suffering, Adam," Aunt Ellen said, her eyes red. "I feel for them, but I can't help much." I sat silently, feeling as if something were crushing my heart. I pictured my dad, his hair now white, hunched over wiping tables in a crowded diner. I pictured my mom, frail and aging, sweeping someone else's floors, her eyes weary. I pictured Matthew, once the hope of the family, now a bitter failure. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone, send money, and help them get back on their feet. I remembered the days we gathered at Maple Street, my mom's laughter, my dad's deep voice. Despite their unfair treatment, they were still my family. But then I remembered the night of the party, my mom's cold stare, my dad's shouting, Matthew's mocking smile. I remembered the 10 years I lived in hardship, slaving away without a single thank you. My heart was torn, caught between two paths. I looked at Aunt Ellen, my voice soft. "Aunt Ellen, should I help them? I don't want them to suffer, but I'm scared of falling back into that cycle." She took my hand, her eyes firm but warm. "Adam, don't," she said, her voice resolute. "Your parents, Matthew. They're still stubborn. They're not sorry, they don't realize how much they've taken you for granted. They blame you, saying if you hadn't stopped sending money, things would be different. Matthew's even worse. He calls you selfish, says you ruined his dreams. They haven't learned from their mistakes. They only know how to point fingers." I frowned, my heart stinging. "They still blame me?" She nodded, sighing. "Yes. I talked to them, tried to make them see how much you've sacrificed, but they wouldn't listen. They only see you as the reason everything fell apart." She squeezed my hand tightly. "Adam, you've done more than enough. 10 years, $80,000, your dreams. Now it's time to take care of yourself. Build your life, like you're doing now. When your parents and Matthew learn their lesson, when they realize how they've wronged you, then you can decide what's next. But for now, don't go back." I nodded, my eyes stinging. Her words cleared the fog in my mind. I wasn't angry at my parents or Matthew, but I couldn't keep sacrificing for people who didn't value me. She stood up and hugged me. "I'm proud of you, Adam," she said, then left. I stood by the window watching golden leaves fall in the park outside. I thought about my parents, about Matthew, about the Maple Street house that was no longer theirs. Part of me felt sorrow, but a larger part felt relief. I had chosen myself, and this time I wouldn't turn back. 1 year after I walked away from the party on Maple Street, I stood at the new construction site of the auto factory, where the assembly line was being upgraded. I wore a safety jacket, a hard hat, and held a checklist in my hand. As a supervisor, I no longer tightened bolts or worked 12-hour night shifts. I oversaw, coordinated, and ensured everything ran smoothly. The roar of machinery, the familiar smell of machine oil, they were still there, but they no longer felt suffocating. I saw myself as part of a larger machine, not the one being drained, but the one steering, the one building. My life now consisted of steady steps forward. My small apartment in the suburbs of Ohio with its window overlooking the park had truly become home. I hung a painting on the wall, a simple scene of a road lined with golden leaves bringing me a sense of peace. I completed the technical course at the community college, earning a certificate, and was now considering further studies to become an engineer. Every evening I sat at my table, opened my books, took notes, and felt like I was constructing something. Not for anyone else, but for myself. I'd saved a modest amount, not much, but enough to dream of a small house in the future or a trip somewhere where I could stand under an open sky and breathe freely. I hadn't contacted my parents or Matthew. After my conversation with Aunt Ellen, I received no further news from them. She mentioned they were still struggling, my parents working odd jobs. Matthew unemployed and bitter. Part of me felt sorrow, but a larger part felt at peace. I had done more than enough, $80,000, 10 years, and my own dreams. They didn't see my worth, didn't show remorse, and I learned that I couldn't change them. I could only change myself, and I thought a lot about justice, about success, about what I once craved. As a kid, I thought justice meant my parents treating me fairly, seeing me the way they saw Matthew. I thought success meant their recognition, being called their pride. But now, standing at the construction site, I realized justice didn't come from others. It came from within, from how I lived, how I rose above my wounds. Success wasn't my parents' proud looks, but the apartment I rented on my own, the certificate I earned through my own efforts, the shoes I bought without needing to patch with duct tape. Justice and success, it turned out, were the bricks I laid day by day to build my own structure, a life rooted in self-respect and resilience. I didn't resent my parents or Matthew. They were my family, and a part of me still loved them, though it was a distant love, no longer painful. I remembered the days we gathered at Maple Street. My mom's laughter, my dad's deep voice, Matthew's mischievous grin when we shared a bunk bed. But I also remembered the sleepless nights, the instant noodle meals, the times I felt invisible. I forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because I wanted to feel lighter. Forgiving didn't mean going back, didn't mean continuing to sacrifice. Forgiving meant moving forward, unburdened by their weight. One morning I stood at the construction site watching the assembly line in action. Robotic arms moved in rhythm, each component fitting together to form a complete car. I smiled, thinking about my own life. I had built my own structure, not perfect, not glamorous, but solid. Each day I added another brick, a new lesson, a new goal, a new piece of pride. I didn't need anyone's approval, didn't need a pat on the shoulder. I knew who I was, and that was enough. I walked out of the construction site, the autumn sun warming my face. Golden leaves fell gently on the road like fragments of old memories. I took a deep breath, savoring the crisp air. Somewhere inside me, the 15-year-old Adam who once dreamed of a blue bicycle was smiling. I never got that bicycle, but I had something greater. A life I built myself, a journey I chose myself. And this time, I wouldn't stop.